you very much for coming and talking to me here.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's really good of you. I know that this is a situation that must be taking quite a lot of.
The toll it's taking is not in. I've always said one of the things I want to do in life is educate, whether that be about stillbirth, whether it be about all the things that matter to me, home birth, whatever it is about, and race is something. I'll do that. So you won't find me shouting my anger. I mean, despite the fact I'm smiling, make no mistake that I am angry.
Yeah.
But I'm not angry now. The reason I can smile and deal with it is because I've been angry for roughly about 47 years. So yeah, I remember the first time I understood that anger, I was 8 years old. So this is nothing new. So when people go, oh, I don't understand what people are so angry about, it's not come out of nowhere. It's a cumulative experience. And I think what breaks me actually is I have got no problem with ignorance at all. What you don't know. And that's why I don't shout, because I want you to hear me. What does break me is people who are willfully ignorant, people who willfully refuse to engage with what people are saying or just listen, and people who are illogical enough to go, there are so many people talking about this, but I don't believe it. Why would so many people on a global scale be saying the same thing if there was nothing there at all? And it's that level of willful ignorance that does my head in. And the other thing that breaks me is when I see people I know, love and respect not engaging either. So for example, sorry, I'm off on one.
No, no, do no, no. I want to talk about this. This
So,
is
for example, this is where it comes
useful.
from. So, when I was acting, I did lots of stuff abroad. So, I went to places like Poland, the Czech Republic, Romania to do Shakespeare. Now, I knew that going there, I was going to be, to coin a phrase, the only black in the village.
Mm,
And so, I remember being on a plane. I was the only black person in the cast and crew. And I was like, right, I just got to, and I was saying, I've just got to prepare my head. I know that where we're going, I'm going to be looked at. And I will accept, for the most part, it's going to be curiosity. And that's okay. But some people, that's a hard thing to be looked at in that way is a hard thing for some people to deal with. I can deal with it, but I do have to prepare my head to get into that place. All the white people that I was there with were like, "Oh, you're exaggerating. It's not going to be that bad. It'll be fine. You'll see. It'll be fine. You're exaggerating. Don't worry about it." I was like, "Fine," and I didn't get angry because I've been living with this for a while.
yeah.
And we got there, and one of the funniest thing was we were in an ice cream shop, and it's quite interesting that I find this funny, whereas most white people who have got a heart are going to be horrified by it, but to me and other black people it's funny because it's just another in the latest list of stories we have to share around the campfire. I was in an ice cream shop and I was standing there, my usual self. A smile is my natural resting face.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, and I turn and there's this little girl, maybe about 5 years old, and she's like this, da, 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 and she looks up and she sees me and her face goes, and she literally starts backing away. And when she's at a safe distance, she turns and runs. I was just like, and like the same white people who were with me were like, oh, that's outrageous, that's terrible. And a few days later, they were angry on my behalf, and I'm
Yeah.
like, your anger now is exhausting to me. What I'm angry about is that, despite the fact that I'm a grown up who's telling you something based on years of lived experience, you chose not to believe me.
Yeah. Yeah. The only way I can get into this, David, because I'm a white person and therefore I won't get it. But tell you what, I do know what it's like to see certain portrayals of women in media and think I'm not thin enough, and then you go on about that to people who are male or who haven't had, and it does happen to guys, but it doesn't happen in quite the same way. And then you say, this is really hurting me, and they go, oh, just don't pay any attention, it's not impact, you shouldn't be paying attention to that. And then something happens when you're watching a TV show and they suddenly go, oh, I have seen that, and you're like, yeah. So that's the only, I can recognize the pattern of what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I haven't been there. So
It's a
yeah,
fantastic analogy. It's a fantastic analogy, and it has the same emotional impact.
yeah, yeah,
And
and it's
it's like,
different.
does my word mean nothing?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Oh
absolutely.
yeah. Again, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So for me, I like hearing about all of this stuff and the insight I can gain. And just like so my friend Nathan Welch, he's trans and is a trans midwife. Like, I don't know why I thought maybe 5 years ago, oh, I'm a good person, I probably know all this stuff already. Like, despite the fact I'd had my own experiences with people not understanding what it was like to be female, I don't know why I thought that 5 years ago, but it's taken a little while to go. If you can just recognize the patterns and listen really, really carefully, you will end up being a better midwife and a better person. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. But please do tell me, like, I'm very up for anything you would like to say. I'm not going to turn around and go, oh, I'm really like, just let's just have a
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
It's really interesting. Sort of mention Nathan and the issues around that, because, and this
Mm.
is why I say I've got no problem with ignorance. My knowledge of the issues that trans people face, I am quite ignorant of it, and I'm not apologetic for that, because I've got 3 children. I'm trying to earn money. I am concerned about issues around stillbirth and issues about colour. I haven't got the time
Mm.
to research everything, to learn everything, to know everything. However, when I sit opposite a trans person, I will listen, because I am aware of how much I don't know. I'm not going to come straight in with and I have got an opinion, and my opinion is probably going to be based around my bias from years and years of growing up in a certain way. So even if I come out of that meeting still clinging to my opinions, it is my duty, my ethical duty, my moral duty, just plain politeness, to listen and hear the person talk. Ignorance is not a problem. Refusal to engage, to combat that ignorance, is a huge problem. Even for me, and I get that it's confusing. So one of the phrases people started using now is BIPOC,
Mm.
BIPOC. And and I was last night. I said to my wife, and it was embarrassing. I said to my wife, she's sitting here, and I went, I don't know what BIPOC stands for.
That's excellent.
And my white
Yeah.
wife had to tell me, because even though I'm switched on, no one had sent me the memo. So I have got as far as LGBT plus, and I got a bit lost, because every time I turned around, another letter was added, and I didn't get the memo because I was looking elsewhere at other issues. So I get that it's hard to keep up, but there does come a point where you have to start learning. So having seen a lot of the stuff that's come from J.K. Rowling, I
Yeah.
had to go, if I've got anything to add to the conversation, I need to go and do a bit of reading.
Yeah.
I need
Yeah.
to listen. If I decide to keep out of that conversation, I don't. But keeping out of the conversation becomes less and less of an option the more involved you get with people. Um, and especially if you are a front-facing worker, if you are a social worker, a midwife, a nurse, a doctor, a police officer, you can't afford to be ignorant to the issues of those you are meant to be a custodian of.
Yes.
It's immoral.
Yeah, there is the difference. So, David, you are an actor and a podcaster, and I'm assuming you have a small business and children and all the rest of it in lockdown. Like, there's a difference between me reading the clinician's guide to gender affirming care, because I know I'm going, like, that's a different thing.
Mm.
But yeah, I have this list of questions, and I'm very
Yeah,
keen
go
on
for it.
sitting
Yeah,
back and
give us a
being a
focus.
student more than anything else, really. But I just thought, because we've brought up J.K. Rowling so soon, this is actually one of my questions towards the end of this document. But it's a really hard question, actually. Okay, so J.K. Rowling, trans rights. I want to advocate for trans rights. Like, I don't want to attack an individual. I don't really want to be involved in cancel culture. And there have been lots of examples of this happening with race recently, where somebody has absolutely got something wrong. And I've sat and gone, okay, so this behavior forms part of this pattern and this is damaging for this reason in this context. But I don't really want to go. I think sometimes we can attack people because it makes us feel better about what we're doing, especially
Yeah,
the lack of
yeah.
what we're doing. So how do we go for accountability as opposed to, you can see what I'm asking here.
Absolutely. So
How,
I don't know if you're aware of the book Why I No Longer Talk to White People About Race.
yeah,
So when it first came out, I was like, here I am talking to a white person about race. So my first instinct was, I don't like the title of this book. I don't like where this book is going. And then I looked a bit more into what the book was about, and I looked at what was making me tired in my own experience. So the first place I came to was, absolutely right. I will talk to someone who's going to listen, but if in the first 3 minutes of a conversation I can tell someone is just there to state their position and nothing else, I am wasting my breath and my time. So you know what? I leave you to say as much as you want to say, wherever you want to say. I'm not going against you, because it's absolutely no point. So I will say what I'm going to say and engage with those that want to be engaged with. The rest of you, nothing I can do about you whatsoever. So fine, I have to find my peace with that, or I'll just be as frustrated as all hell for the rest of my life. So I'm not engaging with you. However, what do you do when that person is very close to home? So it is a fact that you can be married to a person of colour, you can have children that are mixed heritage, and you can still be perpetrating racist behaviours. Yeah, it doesn't excuse you, it doesn't take you away. My wife of 10 years, we've been together 14 years, says she is still learning about her own racist behaviours. Yeah, and what I love about her, she doesn't shy away from that. We've still got a relationship built on love and all the rest of it, and she could, and her ability to go, cool, look at this behaviour of mine. I didn't realise that. I always thought I was a good person, and I'm looking at what I do and realising how I add to the problem, which is a very brave thing to do. So at the moment, I am engaging with someone who is very close to my family circle, who I've
yep.
always suspected was a little bit, no, they had a certain way of being, which I was fine with. I recognise it. It's fine. I'm used to it. Some of the stuff this person has been posting on Facebook in recent days has made me go, I literally want nothing to do with you anymore. My method of confronting him has been to not confront him, because if I do, it will start World War III. But I've been producing a series of videos about racism, and I am literally in every video answering everything he posts on Facebook. There is a conversation going on that he doesn't even realise is happening, and it's fine, because I have chosen not to engage with the consequences of a direct confrontation with him, and I'm happy with that decision. But I am answering everything he says for those that may see it, and if he's on my timeline, so if he sees it, he's got the intelligence enough to realise it's an answer to the things he's been saying, great. If not, I haven't wasted my breath and my time. But other people have engaged with that.
That's a very artistic way of dealing with the problem. I'm quite interested in how you've done that for other reasons. Sometimes as a midwife, you cannot, it's very, very difficult to advocate. Sometimes this is a recognised problem, as you well know, because you're in the infant loss world, and an advocate for that community. And it can be very heartbreaking and like a moral assault to not be able to do that as well as you would like. And the fact that you are talking about it in videos that are well done, I mean, that's the equivalent of me writing about it. I would have thought, like, that's a good thing, David. I'm intrigued. Cool. Okay. Right.
It's also interesting. It's also interesting trying. So I'm the business I'm starting is called Rogue Spirit Podcasting. Just a clang, drop that in there.
Go for it. Yeah.
I know, which I do podcast consulting and editing, and I will launch your podcast. And I'm on a forum of podcast editors, and someone came on and said, what do you do if you have a client whose podcast you're editing, whose political, religious, ethical stance you disagree with in absolutely every way? Someone was like, "Just take the money and run." Just take the money. Don't say, just take the money.
That's the
But it's. I imagine as a midwife, you come across people that you're like, I completely and utterly disagree with who you are, but I have a duty of care to you. It's really
yeah.
hard because
I mean, it wasn't that so much like that. I can kind of put in a box and go, and you deserve excellent care. I will defend your right to excellent care, even if I disagree. It's more like the guidelines say this, and I reckon I should be saying this.
right. Yeah, difficult,
But
difficult.
then you hang out with the Association of Radical Midwives and AIMS and all the rest of it, and you get support and you work through whatever's happening.
I do like a radical midwife.
Do you like a radical midwife? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, interesting people. Right. So back to this list of questions.
Yes.
This is the very first question on the list of questions from the secret community, and I think it will probably has already set the tone for what we're talking about. As someone who is white, I want to support and stand alongside the Black Lives Matter movement. What would you suggest in order to make myself as educated as possible to question the actions and comments of others who clearly don't have this mindset? So we've just kind of done that a little bit, but it's true. In the community, we have these conversations, and there's more questions about the examples, but yeah.
So, novaread.com.
Okay.
Novareid, novaread.com has basically put together everything you need to know. She's put together, so if you just sign up, you put her email in, and she sends you a link to her anti-racism guide. And it's genius. It gives you a link, a list of books to read, a list of articles you can read, if that's what you want, a list of Instagram accounts that you can follow, and social media and website accounts that you can follow. It lists books that are, and it's really hard because I've seen people go, "You need to read this." I'm like, since lockdown with 3 children in the house, I haven't had time to read a pamphlet, let alone a book.
Sure.
But you've got David Olusoga's Black and British: A Forgotten History, which for us is incredible because you've had so many people going, "Don't knock down statues, we can't erase history," and yet we have erased so much history by omission of teaching it.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
people going, Winston, so this person that I've talked about before is a half Irish person going, Winston Churchill, he's a hero, forgetting that Winston Churchill sent the black and tans over to Ireland to terrorise Irish people with rape and brutality.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
so. Don't talk to me about history when you don't know it. Natives, Race and Class in the Ruins of Empire by Carla. Don't touch my hair. Talk to any black or mixed race person about people feeling that they've got the right. "Oh, your hair, it's so lovely, I must touch it." Invasion of personal space happens so often. Racism at Work, The Danger of Indifference by Bina Candola. The list goes on. There are podcasts as well. So literally, Nova Read is literally the best place to start.
Cool.
There, 'cause
Okay.
it's such a now. In terms of what I think people can do, so behind me, I've got books which sum up a really important journey. So this one is called When We Ruled by Robin Walker. It's 700 pages, and in recognition of how inaccessible it can be, he produced a much shorter version, which name I've forgotten. And the whole point of this book is that black history exists before slavery, and that is not in our conscious mindset. When I grew up, I was really excited about, the Spartans and the Greeks and Norse mythology and the Romans, and if we were lucky, we talked about Genghis Khan. But my head was full of sort of white mythologies and the excitement of that, and warriors and Vikings. So what was being layered in my subconscious was excitement about white history and white stories. Not real. And the only thing I learnt about black people is what the slave ship looked like and how slaves were laid out in it, and that we were slaves taken from Africa.
Yeah.
Literally, that was it. So if you look at what we've layered in my subconscious, and if it's in mine, it's in yours.
Yes. Yep.
That's how I'm growing up. That's what's affecting the way I see everything. White people become my default.
Yeah.
People say, "Yeah, but surely when you read a book, you imagine the protagonist is black." No, I don't. I imagine they're white because that is my default and always has been. You are my default for beauty.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And can I just say here, okay, so for people who can't quite get into this idea, and this is not really the same, but you know that pain you feel because you get out of the shower and you don't look like what you have been seeing on TV for the whole of your life. Like I'm white, so that's only like a tiny proportion. But I do recognize that's where those feelings are from, that discord.
Mm.
And this is exactly what you're saying.
And what I want
Yeah,
with that book, When We Ruled, is for people. That book is it's a tour through Black history before slavery. Through Black history, it's got nothing to do with white continents, and that's why I love the film Black Panther. It was a movie that was about a black nation and had nothing to do about their relationship to white nations. It was just about them, and why not? Um, who's heard of the Empire of Benin, which literally spread from one coast of Africa to the other? You know, the administrative ability to run an empire like that is incredible. That they had a university that had 15,000 people in it, while in Europe was still trying to work out what a potato was.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
no one knows these things, so they're not layered in who we are. And I think it's really important to realize that black nations have had as important a place in world history as all the white
yeah,
nations that our brains are full of. Black British history, knowing that black people have been here since the Roman times. Not
yeah,
we didn't just come with Windrush. We are a part of the fabric of this society. There's so much evidence about black Tudors, so much Elizabeth I. There were so many black people in London. She wanted to deport them. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
indeed. Yeah,
We've been here for a while. So yeah, sorry, I could go on about just layering up your subconscious with sort of the narrative. Here's another way. So my best friend wrote a book, a fiction book, and people went to, and lately people going to him, really nice diversity, and he went, I'm not doing diversity. I'm reflecting the people I grew up with at school. You know, and there were all kind. There were Greek people in there, Japanese people in there, Chinese people, Lebanese, because we just grew up with. He wasn't doing diversity. He was reflecting real life, and the book got optioned for TV, so you have to do a treatment of it to make it palatable for the production audiences you're going for. When the treatment came back, 95% of the ethnic people in there had been turned white, and all the women in it, the strong, independent women, had become love interests. That's what they did to make it palatable for TV. So what's that say about our defaults?
this is really sad, but can I just say, so as a midwife, you spend a long time revising biology and guidelines and stats. Like I've got my revision cards I can show you here, like loads of them. Learning about Black history is an absolute joy. It's really interesting. Like it has been reading Natives by Carla and going on some of those parts, and there's a hell of a lot for me to do. Like I haven't got to Elizabethan history at all yet, but like being able to say I'm like I can spend time on this. This is a really good thing to be doing, and it's also just really interesting, and it fills in the gaps. And then what you're saying about how things have changed to be on TV and what casting directors do and all of the rest of it, which I know is your world as an actor. You will know far more about this than me. It's really frustrating and hard to learn about it, but it's also just like some of the stuff that Carla comes up with is kind of hilarious. Some of his critiques of like Hollywood movies and how they
Uh,
made Imhotep the mummy, when he came back, like he's like some white guy running around to be him, and this it's just like when you look at it, it's so funny some of this
I
stuff
know
that it's worth.
Three Musketeers.
Three Musketeers?
The
I
Three
don't know
Musketeers.
this.
Dumas, who wrote it, Alexander
Okay,
Dumas, mixed race. His father was from Haiti. His
okay,
father, his father was also one of Napoleon's top generals. He
wow,
was this 6 foot tall, dark Haitian man who apparently was drop dead gorgeous, was a hit with the ladies. Um, Apparently, he took on a regiment by himself and came out unscathed. They got whatever. He disagreed with Napoleon. I mean, a lot of Alexander Dumas' swashbuckling writing, like the Man in the Iron Mask and stuff, was based on his father's exploits. He disagreed with Napoleon on some of his African campaign, and he turned out to be right about it. Napoleon said, off you go then. So he got a boat back, which got shipwrecked in Italy. He got put in jail for 2 years. Napoleon refused to pay the ransom. He lost an eye and his health in prison. When he got released, he got back to France to find that black people were no longer allowed to live in Paris, and that Napoleon was trying to reinstate slavery in the colonies, and died a pauper outside the bounds of Paris.
Wow.
And I'm like,
Crikey.
how can someone who the Three Musketeers is such an important part of our cultural
It is.
TV
Yeah.
landscape? No one's got an eye. I think there was a movie about Alexander Dumas, who was played by a white guy, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, black poet, in and around us. And you go, well, how is Britain racist? How are these things racist? We've got a mayor of London called Khan, because we are still working on the defaults. Now, if these defaults are layering our subconscious, it means we have bias that we don't even know we have. I have those biases. If I, as a black man, have those biases, no white person can tell me that they don't.
It's very slippery.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we have to be able to sit with how uncomfortable that makes us and challenge themselves. I've had to challenge myself, and I'm going to do a video talking about my biases, and it's taken me a while to do it because it's embarrassing and it's quite shameful what I'm going to say. I've had to sit with it. So can people whose race puts them in a position of power. I'm not saying it means that you are, as an individual, are more powerful than me. I'm not saying that, but it's that you've got the dominant culture, which means that those biases are more dangerous than the ones that come from me.
Mm.
My biases are dangerous to you as an individual if I take a dislike to you and your
Yeah.
colour, but your biases, your cumulative biases, are more dangerous to my cumulative people.
Because we're more comfortable with them. So comfortable with that. We don't recognise when it's a problem a lot of the time. Ibram X. Kendi's book, which I had the opportunity to tear my way through in lockdown, luckily, but How to Be an Anti-Racist, it's really, that must have been extremely difficult for him to write, because there was a lot in there about being a young black man and being racist, like having those narratives. But that's a masterpiece. If anybody wants to read it, it's very interesting.
I think the other thing that makes it hard is you see titles like that. I mean, what else do you call these books? You see titles and you think they are
Yeah.
about accusing you,
Yeah.
whereas not. They were saying, I've had to examine my life, and these are conclusions I've made about race, and some of them actually reflect on me quite badly. But so it's not about accusing you; it's about laying out what needs to be done.
Yeah, to quote Austin Channing Brown on Brene Brown's recent podcast, she said, prominent anti-racism activist, you will feel attacked when you first learn about anti-racism. That is not abnormal. That is completely, we should normalize that experience. Might it be that you are not a terrible person? There's just more to the world, and you have the capacity to be an even better one. And I think that's the angle, perhaps, to have a look at. So when I have people in my community, so I run 27,000 strong community of student, qualified, aspiring midwives, others in the birth world. And I love it, but it is a starting place to have conversations because it's online and it's quick. So we are not going to change anybody's mind who is like, online communication is a starting place. We signpost. But what do I say to people who, I have no interest in villainizing people, vilifying people. But what do I say when somebody, for instance, put a link to a Guardian article? It was the chief nursing officer who or maybe the head of the Royal College of Nursing, and this isn't my world, but she's Donna, I can't remember her surname, and she wrote an article for the Guardian saying, if you're black, you're going to be less listened to in terms of your healthcare. Like, we know this is statistically true. And as soon as that came up in the community, there were one or two comments immediately saying, this happened to me too, and I'm white. And that's a really difficult thing for me, because one of them was saying, my granddad was ignored for 8 years and he died. So what I did is I muted those individuals, and I called them on the phone, and I said, we really need to be listening to black and brown people, because it's dangerous. Like, we can see this is happening. And I know this stuff is, but like, how should one respond? I don't even know what I'm asking here. These are the situations
I
that
know
come
what you're
up.
asking. It's really difficult because we've started to use terminology in things. Language evolves, and we're using terminology which has meant something slightly different for a while. So when we say privilege now,
Yeah.
we go to our old definition of privilege, And you got white people go, I am not privileged, I am poor, I am struggling, I've got lupus, I've got this, how am I privileged?
Mm.
And what we're talking about in this circumstance is we're talking in a cumulative manner, in that so the best way I can put it is, let's look at the stats. If a white woman goes into hospital pregnant, there is a chance she will die. And it's horrible, and it's heartbreaking, and it's made my eyes water just having to say those words. And it's not fair, and it's not right, and so on and so on. And I'm acknowledging that, and I am hearing that, and I'm hearing the pain behind it, and the struggle of not being listened to. And I know white people who have gone into hospital, especially women, and not got the pain medication they need, because for some reason doctors tend not to listen to women. I don't know why. In general. However, if my mother goes into hospital, she may come out perfectly healthy. Perfectly healthy. But what the stats show us is that she's 5 times more likely to not. So what we're talking about in this situation are the odds. We're not saying your pain isn't real. We're saying the odds are against us. All we're asking for is to equal the odds. That's all this is about. Equaling the odds, nothing else. Not taking away from your pain, from your suffering, from your lack of privilege as a poor person. And actually, in supporting Black Lives Matter, what we're trying to do, what it's trying to do, is to have a rising ship for everyone who's not privileged, which means the underclass, whatever colour they are, all ships rise. Yeah, we are attacking bias and lack of privilege wherever it is. We're just focusing on those people at the moment for who the odds are against.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember the person who wrote this, but there was a thing about, it might have even been from you, but there was a thing about if you go to a concert and you're really
That was,
tall.
that
Was
was
that you?
yeah.
I've been thinking about that for days and trying to work out who said it. No wonder I couldn't Google for it. It's probably on one of your videos.
Yeah.
Okay, take it away, David Monteith. Tell us this analogy because it's a good one.
So, so privilege. Actually, literally, someone after I said it, someone said, "Oh, there was a black woman in America who said this like a while back," and I was like, "Oh, sorry." Um,
It
um,
happens.
so if you go to a concert and you're a short person, it's harder for you to see the stage, especially if you're standing behind a tall person. All we're asking is like to go, sorry, could you move aside so I could see the stage? Sure. When you move aside, you can still see the stage, and we can see the stage. That's the privilege that we're talking about. Technically, because of the setup, because of the system, you're a little bit taller than us. We'd just like to be able to see the stage as well. That's what we're asking.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I shall be using that. Right. So, we are seeing a lot in the news because of George Floyd and other murders at the moment about the systemic racism in the US. How does this differ in the UK? What is systemic racism in the UK? What does that look like?
The difference between all systemic racism, you have to look at the roots of our society.
Mhm.
Um, it's a lot more stark in the US because slavery on US soil was just blatant. Slavery on British soil, not in the colonies, on British soil, is apparently illegal, even though people would bring their slaves over and not actually tell them that. So they would kind of have an indentured slavery. Um, so it's a lot less subtle, which kind of typifies a lot of the difference in racism. Between there's a lot of non-subtle racism, but that doesn't really bother me. Before it's that kind of subtle racism that people don't realise they're doing, and that's kind of all the way back in our differences. But the problem with the UK is a lot of our racism is based in class. We have a huge class structure here, much more so than in the States, and it is not dismantled, it's not dead. That's why I'm saying that poor white people are actually the best, should be hand in hand with people talking about Black Lives Matter, because what
Mm.
we are essentially fighting is a class-based system that has put the other at the bottom. Um, It's there in terms of our education. So once again, while we learn about so much history, we are omitting lots and lots of history that show us about our relationship to the colonies, our relationship to labour. It's just been omitted. We've not got that fair footing of learning, of setting that default in our brain. The police system, you look at where that came from, nominally was there to protect poor people, but essentially was there to began protecting those who could afford it. And what happens with systems is they don't get reviewed and replaced; they build on what's there. So you have at the foundation that we built on something which is prejudiced against a certain class of people and a certain colour of people. And those things are never changed without kind of wiping it out and starting again, which is never going to happen. That's kind of gone a bit. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's helpful. It's more subtle because we don't have a cohort of people who are like mostly descended from slavery. However, the structures that we have in place were built around that time, so they have inherent racism, and it would be very unusual if we had none of that structure left today, especially when we haven't paid attention to it or
absolutely
taught it.
Which is also the same in medicine.
Yeah.
As well. And a lot of the learning and a lot of the systems that we use in British midwifery and gynecological medicine we have taken from pioneers in the States. And the father of gynecologicalism got his stripes by experimenting on black female slaves without anaesthetic.
Is this James Sims?
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, just for anybody who doesn't know, he did a lot of fistula operations on black slaves who couldn't consent, and these were very painful because there was no anaesthesia around.
And with an audience, usually.
With an audience of 12 or more other obstetricians. So, and I do think it's something that perhaps we should explore, because it wasn't explored as part of my training. We still call it a sim speculum sometimes. And I think, that has a heritage to it. We should have a chat about that.
And also it's to do with them, and also our figures, the figures that we often, they are based on a very small cohort, ethnically speaking, the figures that we use to make decisions about birth and so on. And bear in mind that, so when it comes to baby loss, which is my thing, and remember I said there's a lot of this about equaling the odds. So the figures are showing us that in proportion, black women are 121% more likely to have a stillbirth, and Asian women 66% more likely than white women. In the States, these figures are very, very similar for African American women, Latino women, and Native American women. So, number one, that shows us it's about. Well, whenever I say that, the first thing people say, and they don't realise how disingenuous this is it genetic?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, because there is no such thing as a black race. Black people are made up of so many different races and cultures. There is no one genetic determinant throughout them all.
More ethnic diversity in Africa than there is between white Europeans.
Exactly. So it's just a nonsense question, which only leaves us one thing. That decisions are being made according to your implicit bias, maybe even my implicit bias. It's why it's so important to challenge that in yourself, no matter how defensive or attacked you may feel, because it literally costs lives.
Yeah. So we need to be just okay. So the stuff I will be doing as a midwife, just listening really carefully, having a much lower threshold for reporting problems, especially if the person in front of me is telling me there's a problem if they're black. I'm very careful about pain relief, whether their rights are being upheld, extremely good documentation and communication to other staff. There are other things that I will keep reflecting on, but these are some of the things in my head that I will be trying to do. And also learning from Like, there are some fantastic black midwives and doulas out there that we could do with, you know, listening to very carefully, I think.
And my thing is, even if you find some of these midwives and doulas aggressive, which is a term I've got a problem with, because sometimes to be heard, people have to speak a bit louder, and that's interpreted as aggression.
Mm-hmm.
Listen anyway. You know, be a better person than you were and listen, because there may be life-saving things that you're hearing. Um, just a slight tangent to go back, because you're saying
Mm.
about the UK. This just went ping in my head. The UK having less of a cohort of people sort of came out of slavery. So the
Mm.
thing to bear in mind. So. Uh, and this is why there's this low level of anger that's been coming for a long time. So number one is personal experience given to that anger, and then there's that generational thing that sits on your shoulders. So one of that is 1962 was the year my country, Jamaica, stopped being owned by the British. It was literally just a few years before I was born. I know I don't look it, but it was literally a few. Can you imagine? Almost in my lifetime,
Yeah.
my country was owned by another. Um, my
Mm.
surname is Monteith. It's a Scottish name. How do you think I got that? It is the name of the person who bought my great 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 grandfather, and there, but for a slip of time and grace, goes me. Were I born 200 years earlier, that would actually be me. That's all it took. 200 years, which is like, that's four generations for me. Great 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 grandfather. It's not an awful long time ago. That sits in my head going, that could have been me. It was my great 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 father.
Mm-hmm.
These things build. If you want to know where the anger's coming from, people go, just calm down. How do I calm down with this weight sitting on my shoulder? I can calm down. I've chosen to. But understand that sometimes it's hard to calm down.
Yeah. And one of my questions here is, if somebody says, can we are, by talking about race and by talking about history in this way, we are making things more divisive and more dangerous. This is a question that comes up, which
Brilliant
is,
question. I love it. I
yeah.
love it. I love
So
it.
I don't agree with this. Please tell me what you would say.
Someone said to me yesterday on my page, they said, I think the way that things are being done are stoking the fire. Completely missing the point that for it to be stoked, the fire has to exist already. The things that you are now being seen as divisive have been divisive for the last 400 years. Nothing has changed. All that's happened is we've ripped off the band-aid, and you are now experiencing that which we have lived with our whole lives. Nothing's changed except you're seeing it. We've finally gone, I can't literally bear not to talk about it anymore. That's the only thing that's changed. Something has happened which has gone, oh, I can talk about it freely for a change rather than talking about it over a drink with my black buddies. That's the only, it's made you uncomfortable. How do you think I have felt for the last 50 years? It's not any more divisive than it was yesterday.
And there's a difference between uncomfortable and unsafe as well. Like, I can be uncomfortable, you are more unsafe.
I
Which
feel
one
like
do we pay
my,
attention
my
to?
wife is literally scared for me leaving the house because she's
Yeah.
seen. I have a friend whose white wife has gone, I'm scared. She's seen the abuse her son has got, and her husband's driving down the road, someone shouts nigger. People go to me, UK still isn't racist. A friend of mine got followed while walking a dog. People going, all lives matter, all lives matter.
Wow.
When I was young, I got called nigger to my face, and spat at in the street. How is having this discussion being divisive now? It's showing you what I've lived with. My father, do you know what my parents had to do? And every single parent of my generation, and it turns out people of my generation now are doing, we had to sit down and have the chat. Now, when I say that, the first thing you think about is like the birds and the bees. No, not that one. Never actually had that one. Actually, never actually had that one. That could explain a lot. The chat is how to deal with police as a young black person. because my parents knew it was going to happen, and it did. Has that even crossed your mind as a white person as something you have to do?
No, and
You know, I started to count. And my white friends when I was younger were like, "Oh, you're exaggerating again." And then I started to keep count. When I started driving, I started to keep count. When I am the least threatening-looking person, I'm a bit bigger now. Well, I'm a bit bigger now. When I was young, I was this skinny, geeky kid. I was not threatening at all, in my eyes. And when I started to drive, I started counting one year because it was getting a bit ridiculous. So in the 1 year I decided to count, I got stopped in my car 40 times.
wow, that is astounding. I don't know.
32 of those times, the reason given was I matched the description. Now, I had that a lot as a teenager walking with my friends. You match a description. And there was one point where they caught the person who it was, and it turns out I knew that person. Nothing like that person in nothing at all. I'm like, they were darker than me. But there was research done that showed that the average white person has a more difficult time telling apart people of other ethnicities than whatever. And there was another really interesting experiment done in the States where they had a standard American voice reading something, and they showed a picture of a white man, the same voice reading something different, showing the picture of an Asian man, and the white people watching struggled to understand the same voice while it was over the picture of the Asian man. And I'm like, if that doesn't tell you something about implicit bias, these are scientific experiments. They're not from my mouth. They're from white people doing these experiments. That doesn't tell you how important implicit bias is, and that we are not being divisive. We are trying to show you that things exist which are dangerous to the physical and mental well-being of us and our children.
Mm.
And you go, oh, someone's got a chip on their shoulder. Is it a surprise? Is it a chip on their shoulder, or is it someone's knee on their neck?
Yeah, and this is the thing, like if we debate another important topic in the news at the moment, I don't know, anything at all, like we can have a conversation about it, and it's okay to get sort of inflamed about the subject if you're passionate. If I have a debate about feminism with somebody in my family, I have to be about 100 times more restrained, because otherwise I'm an angry ranty feminist and I'm off on one, and I found my people and I'm just feeling good because I found my people. Do you know, like, and I would assume it's similar with your children involved. Like one day it will probably be a female child of mine, but it isn't at the moment. But like, I don't understand what that's like. And like the restraint must be exhausting. Like,
no, I mean, you know what? So we're in lockdown with 3 children who are insane. I mean, they were insane to begin with. And the energy, and there are days where I'm struggling, my wife's struggling, and they just go on and on at you, and the reaction is like, go on, you find yourself shouting, saying things you don't want to say. So I utterly...
That's really good. Yeah.
Anybody wants a 4-year-old, I am literally more than happy to pay the postage.
Put it in the notes under, yeah.
Oh, I mean, wow. Oh, geez. But they, you know, I feel for them. They're losing their minds, and it's really hard to. While I'm dealing with my own stuff, it's really hard to find a compassionate response. But do you know what? I am going to go the extra mile to find that compassionate response, even if it means apologising to them afterwards, because I want a good outcome for them. If we want a good outcome for society, you have to find that place where you feel attacked, or you feel people are being ranty or being angry, and go, actually, what is a great outcome for society? If you're not interested in that outcome and you just want violence, then I'm kind of done with you. I haven't got the space and the time. I've stopped talking to... I have made the decision to stop talking about the issue with certain members of family, not my family, because it's just going to break my heart. So I'm going to protect myself and actually use my abilities to speak to those who may listen. And I've got the amount of messages, since I started doing my videos, the messages I've got from people going, wow, this is the first time I've understood what privilege is. It's the first time I've understood the burden I'm putting on. It's the first time I've decided that I need to change my curriculum and the way I teach. So Do you know what? That's where I'll waste my energy. People who can make that. Here's another point. When the statue came down in Bristol,
Mm.
that's a tipping point that most people don't understand. There has not been a significant change in culture or regime or revolution or anything without the toppling of a statue or a monument or a wall or a building. Never in history has there been change without that happening. What that says to me is we've reached a tipping point. Things are going to change. Whether you want them to or not, whether you are comfortable with it or not, it will take time. It probably won't be into my children's time, but that was a tipping point, which means it is inevitable. It was very symbolic of what's coming. Decide now what side of history you want to be on, because I have a book here, From Columbus to Castro, The History of the Caribbean, which is very much about that history of change. And there's a lot of people in this book who said things very similar to what a lot of white people are saying in objection at the moment, incredibly similar, separated by 200 years, saying incredibly similar things, who are now quite definitively on the wrong side of history. So decide where you want to be, because the tipping point has come.
Okay. I think that is a pretty astounding way to end this. I thank you very much for your time. I guess the final question I have is, this could have happened a long time ago. Why is it happening now?
Really interesting. And this is what, having given in mind what I've just said, this is what scares me. It has happened before. It has
Oh,
happened before so many times. Black Panthers, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Brixton riots, Tottenham riots. It has happened time and time again. The reason that this time maybe feels a bit different is because it's the straw that's broken the camel's back. They've said, and it's not just like we are protesting that George Floyd died. And keep in mind, apparently there's been 121 deaths of black people in America at the hands of the police since George Floyd died. Even more beatings, and even more white people calling the police on black people for doing things like sitting in front of their home or using their gym's workplace. What this is going, how many times does this have? We've reached a point where, sorry, let me start a sentence again. This isn't a protest about George Floyd dying. This is a protest about us having been here time and time and time again, and the change not happening. That's what this is about. How many times do we have to be here to learn? And people have gone, for some reason this time we've had enough of this repeated pattern. We've tried to do it peacefully. We took a knee. Peace. That's a peaceful protest. Didn't like that. We marched with Martin Luther King peacefully. Didn't like that. The reason, this is why it's boiling over. How many times do we have to be here peacefully, to be here violently, and still nothing happening? People are tired of that. And I think we've reached what we call critical mass. We've
I
reached
hope so.
critical mass of it happening and happening and happening and happening and happening and happening and happening. Nothing about this situation, nothing is new.
Yeah, nothing is. And I'm hoping the fact that I'm having more conversations with white people about this than I ever had before, because I first got really interested based on the Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race book about 3 years ago. But I'm hoping it's in the air more now. I'm
Can,
hoping so.
can I
Anyway.
show, before we go, I just want to show you
Mm.
something if I can find it. Um, da, da, da. Rubbish computer. Give me a second. You can edit out this blank space of me
That's fine.
looking for stuff. Kind. What am I looking for? Pictures, images. Can't find it, even though... Can't find it. It was literally a list of the last words of black people killed by police. I took a picture of it because it just broke my heart. It was a long list. It had stuff like, "You're choking me, please don't kill me, but I didn't do anything, but it wasn't me, but I don't understand." Words like that, which are heartbreaking words. And so that, I was looking at it and it broke my heart. And then I looked at what was next to those words, and it was years. And it was the year that it happened. And it started with George Floyd, and it went back and 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 back. There must have been about 20 names on that list, all saying, "But it wasn't me, but I didn't do anything, but you're killing me, you're choking me." And these are people's last words. "I want my mother."
Mm.
Um, there's a man who got shot in the back who won't go home to see his 2-year-old daughter in the last week. And again, my whole point is there is nothing new. If you think we're being divisive, we're showing you what we've lived with for a while. And that is not to take away from white pain. That is not to take away from your lack of privilege in certain situations. It's to show that there is a systemic problem which is disproportionately harming a section of the population, and that demands a response.
Yep. So the evidence is there. We can see it. Go and have a look at the Embrace review. It is like, even if you don't agree with anything we're saying, the evidence is apparent. Like, this isn't us saying this. It's been on Radio 4. Like, this is a thing. And then if you're interested in why those things might be, go and do some reading, and then very quickly the pattern emerges, and there's a lot you can do to help. Basically, if you're a healthcare professional, there is a lot you can do to help. And yeah, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. Okay.
Thank you for opening this stuff.